What if the reason your life feels different lately isn't because you're lost, but because you're leaving an old reality behind? What if the doors that closed, the people who drifted away, the plans that didn't work out, and the strange restlessness you've been carrying were never obstacles at all? What if they were signs that your frequency is changing? Because right now, something is happening beneath the surface of your life. A new chapter is forming. A stronger version of you is emerging. And if this message found you today, there is a chance you're standing at the edge of a breakthrough far bigger than you realize. The chapter you've been waiting for may not be coming someday. It may already be opening. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear could completely change the way you see your past, your present, and the future that's calling your name. Before we begin this transmission, like this video if you're ready to step into your next level. Subscribe for more frequency elevating, consciousness expanding, and life transforming content. Comment below, I'm YFR if you're claiming this new season of your life. And tell me which country, city, or region of Earth is receiving this message today. Before we begin, I want you to consider a possibility that may sound impossible at first. What if the greatest victory of your life has already happened, but you simply have not recognized it yet? Not a victory measured by money. Not a victory measured by status. Not a victory that other people can see and congratulate you for. A deeper victory. A kind that changes the entire trajectory of your future before any visible evidence appears. Because if you found this message today, if among billions of videos, millions of distractions, and endless streams of information your attention somehow landed here, then perhaps something more important is occurring than you realize. Perhaps your field has begun responding to a frequency that matches the person you are becoming. Perhaps the chapter you have been waiting for is not approaching from the distance. Perhaps it is already opening around you. Most people spend their lives looking for proof that change is coming. They search for signs in their circumstances. They search for validation in other people. They search for certainty before taking action. Yet the universe often works in reverse. The internal shift comes first. The external evidence comes later. The energetic architecture changes before physical reality reflects the change. This principle appears throughout nature. Long before a flower emerges above the soil, invisible processes are already underway beneath the surface. Long before dawn becomes visible, light has already begun traveling across the horizon. Long before transformation appears in your life, transformation begins within your consciousness. This is why some of the most important periods of growth initially feel confusing rather than exciting. You expect clarity but encounter uncertainty. You expect immediate rewards but experience endings. You expect answers but receive questions. The old frequency begins losing its grip, yet the new frequency has not fully stabilized. You find yourself standing between two realities. One no longer feels aligned. The other has not completely arrived. This between space can feel uncomfortable because the mind prefers certainty. It prefers familiar struggles over unfamiliar possibilities. Yet every major breakthrough passes through this territory. Think about the seasons. Winter does not suddenly become summer overnight. There is a transition, a period when old conditions are disappearing and new conditions are emerging. Awakening follows the same pattern. Frequency shifts follow the same pattern. The chapter you are leaving must release its hold before the next chapter can fully unfold. Yet, because this process often involves letting go, many people misinterpret it. They assume something is wrong. They assume they are moving backward. They assume the closed doors, shifting relationships, and unexpected changes are signs of failure. In reality, they may be signs of preparation. What if every ending that frustrated you was creating space? What if every delay that tested your patience was strengthening something within you? What if every person who walked away, every opportunity that disappeared, every path that unexpectedly closed was not removing your future, but protecting it? Human beings naturally focus on what is leaving because loss captures attention. Yet consciousness expands when attention shifts toward what is being created. The field cannot remain occupied by frequencies that no longer match your future. New growth requires room. New chapters require space. New realities require different foundations. There is a reason many people experience a strange restlessness before major transformation. The soul recognizes movement before the mind understands it. Something begins pulling you forward. Familiar environments feel different. Familiar conversations lose their emotional charge. Familiar ambitions no longer create the same excitement. You cannot always explain why. You only know that the old version of your life feels increasingly difficult to inhabit. This sensation is often interpreted as dissatisfaction. Sometimes it is actually evolution. Sometimes it is evidence that your consciousness is preparing to operate at a different level. Imagine trying to wear clothes you outgrew years ago. Nothing is technically wrong with the clothes. They simply no longer fit who you are. The same thing happens with identities. The same thing happens with frequencies. At some point, the version of yourself that carried you through one chapter becomes too small for the next. The habits, beliefs, fears, and assumptions that once protected you begin restricting you. Growth demands expansion. Expansion demands change. And change demands courage. Many people believe courage means moving forward without fear. True courage is moving forward while fear is present. The threshold between chapters is rarely comfortable. It asks you to trust before certainty appears. It asks you to release before replacement arrives. It asks you to believe before proof becomes visible. Yet this is where transformation lives. Not in certainty, not in guarantees, but in the willingness to continue despite uncertainty. There is another reason the beginning of your best chapter may feel different from what you expected. Most people imagine transformation arriving through addition. More money, more opportunities, more recognition. Yet often the first sign of a new chapter is subtraction. Distractions disappear. Misaligned relationships fade. Limiting beliefs become visible. Old emotional patterns lose their authority. The field begins clearing itself. This can feel uncomfortable because the ego interprets subtraction as loss. Consciousness recognizes it as preparation. A gardener understands this principle. Before new growth flourishes, pruning becomes necessary. Branches that no longer contribute must be removed. Dead growth must be cleared away. Space must be created. From a limited perspective, pruning looks destructive. From a larger perspective, it is an act of preparation. Life often operates the same way. What appears to be falling apart may actually be making room for something stronger. This is why your best chapters not begin when every circumstance finally aligns. It begins when you become aligned. It begins when your internal signal changes. It begins when you stop negotiating with limitations that belong to your past. It begins when you stop asking old versions of yourself to guide you into a future they were never designed to enter. The future requires a different frequency, and that frequency begins with awareness. Perhaps the most important thing to understand right now is this. You do not have to force your next chapter into existence. You do not have to chase it across the horizon. You do not have to convince life to deliver it. Your task is simpler and more challenging at the same time. Your task is to become the person capable of sustaining it. Because opportunities can be received only by the consciousness prepared to recognize them. Abundance can be sustained only by the mindset prepared to hold it. Transformation can be embodied only by the awareness prepared to live it. And maybe that is why you are here today. Maybe this moment is not random. Maybe the restlessness you have been feeling is not confusion, but preparation. Maybe the uncertainty is not evidence of failure, but evidence of movement. Maybe the chapter you've been silently praying for is no longer waiting somewhere in the future. Maybe it has already begun unfolding beneath the surface. Maybe the frequency has already changed. And if that is true, then the question is no longer whether your best chapter is coming. The question is whether you are ready to walk through the gate when it opens. There is a moment in every transformation that almost nobody talks about. A moment when the old reality has not completely disappeared, but it no longer holds the same power it once did. A moment when the familiar begins feeling unfamiliar. A moment when the things that once defined you start slipping through your fingers, not because you failed to hold on to them, but because they were never meant to travel with you into your next chapter. This is the stage where many people become confused. They think something has gone wrong. They think they are losing direction. They think they are somehow moving backward. Yet what they are actually experiencing is the old frequency losing its grip. Frequency is not just about what you attract. It is about what you can no longer tolerate. As your consciousness changes, your relationship with life changes. Conversations that once excited you may suddenly feel empty. Habits that once felt normal may begin feeling heavy. Goals that once seemed important may lose their emotional charge. It is not because those things are bad. It is because you are no longer the same person who needed them. The old chapter was written for an older version of you. The new chapter requires a different signal. This is why growth often feels like loss before it feels like expansion. The mind focuses on what is leaving. Consciousness focuses on what is arriving. The mind sees closed doors. Consciousness sees open space. The mind sees uncertainty. Consciousness sees possibility. Yet, while you are standing in the middle of the transition, it is often difficult to recognize the difference. Think about a rocket leaving Earth's atmosphere. The greatest resistance occurs at the beginning. Tremendous energy is required to break free from gravity. There is shaking. There is pressure. There is turbulence. If the rocket could think, it might believe something was wrong. It might assume the resistance meant it should turn back. Yet the resistance is not evidence of failure. It is evidence of ascension. The same principle applies to your life. The greater the transformation, the more resistance often appears before the breakthrough. Many people abandon their next chapter because they misinterpret resistance. They assume discomfort means stop. They assume uncertainty means danger. They assume endings mean loss. But what if the discomfort is evidence that your identity is expanding? What if the uncertainty is evidence that your future is larger than your current understanding? What if the endings are creating room for opportunities that cannot enter while the old chapter remains open? One of the strangest experiences during a frequency shift is realizing that you can no longer return to who you were. You may try. You may revisit old habits. You may reconnect with old ways of thinking. Yet something feels different. The old reality no longer fits. It feels like wearing clothes that belong to a younger version of yourself. They once fit perfectly. Now they feel restrictive. This is not a mistake. This is evolution. The universe rarely upgrades your circumstances before upgrading your awareness. The internal change comes first. The external reflection follows. That is why so many people become discouraged too early. They expect visible results immediately. They expect instant confirmation. Yet the most powerful transformations begin invisibly. The roots grow before the tree appears. The foundation is built before the structure rises. The signal changes before reality reflects the change. And perhaps this is what has been happening to you. Maybe the restlessness you've been feeling is not confusion. Maybe it is preparation. Maybe a people who drifted away were not punishments. Maybe they were part of the clearing process. Maybe the opportunities that disappeared were not setbacks. Maybe they were redirections. Maybe the life you thought you wanted had to fall away, so the life you were actually meant to experience could emerge. The old frequency survives by convincing you that nothing is changing. It wants you to stay where you are because familiarity feels safe. Yet your soul recognizes something the old frequency cannot understand. It recognizes growth. It recognizes expansion. It recognizes the call of a larger future. That call is what brought you here. That call is what keeps whispering that there is more available for you. More peace. More alignment. More purpose. More authenticity. More life. The chapter that is ending taught you valuable lessons. It shaped you. It strengthened you. It prepared you. But preparation is not the destination. At some point, you must stop training and start stepping forward. At some point, you must stop waiting for certainty and begin trusting the signal. At some point, you must walk through the gate. And maybe that gate is closer than you think. Maybe the chapter you've been praying for is already unfolding behind the scenes. Maybe the frequency has already changed. Maybe the old grip is already loosening. Maybe this moment is the evidence you've been waiting for. And before we continue to the next part of this journey, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below and tell us which country, city, region, or part of the earth is receiving this message today. If this transmission found you at exactly the right moment, let everyone know where you're watching from. It is incredible to see awakened minds connecting from every corner of the world. What part of the planet is receiving this frequency right now? Which region, nation, city, or place on Earth are you listening from as this message reaches you?